What's up and welcome back to Talk Nutrition. Today we're joined once again by Greg Sutton. What's up, Greg? How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much for having me on. I know we're excited to dive into this.
Dude, I just had a massive blood sugar spiking meal and I think I'm going to die.
Oh, that's very concerning. Definitely if you look at a lot of the info online, that's very, very concerning. You messaged me, what do you want to talk about on the podcast? Invited me on. What do you want to talk about this time? And I was so fired up when you messaged me because I was mid Instagram war with those people in that comment section I was talking about. So let's dive in. Let's talk about sugar, blood sugar spikes, and all the things that everyone is telling you that you should be concerned about.
Dude, it's so crazy. Like I was just saying before we hit record, like back in 2012 when I was overweight, that was what got me into fitness. Like I was 110 kilos. I had no idea what I was doing, So I also went online. This is before like social media blew up and, but we had the forums and the blogs and the documentaries and the same stuff is still going around. We're still seeing like sugar being demonized. And I'm not saying that people should eat sugar like by the kilo, but there's a lot of fear mongering. You see all these so-called coaches or PTs. And I do really wonder where it comes from. Because I don't even believe many people do it with bad intentions. But there's a lot of people spreading information that's literally incorrect. And that's something that's been frustrating me quite a bit. And like I said, it's been the case, man. Like, it's nothing recent. Forever, we've had bad information in the media. Social media as the Wild West especially. But like, there's so much... We have such an opportunity to help people by spreading good information. Yet, because anyone has the channels now and the ability to spread information, a lot of misinformation goes out too. And I think when it comes to nutrition, like the whole sugar conversation, even people saying that the sugar from a fucking apple or strawberries is bad for you. Like, long story short, the people like myself in the past who are looking for help, who legit don't know what to do and just want to get healthy and lose weight, I'm not saying they're being taken advantage of, but they're just being made more confused than they already are. And that's why I wanted to bring you on, because it's a big problem. It's holding people from getting healthy. It almost takes away the power from people, because now they feel like they're doomed because they're pre-diabetic or whatever it may be, and they can never have sugar, right? So instead of that, like, let's first discuss like the post and the discussion and stuff, but let's get into like how it actually works so that people also know, hey, okay, maybe I can have some. And if they are dealing with certain conditions, knowing that they're not doomed, then they can still do something about it, right? Because what's like the main thing you see around blood sugar online where you're like, we got to address that? The
idea that someone who is healthy, and I'm going to say this many times in the podcast, someone who is healthy. And when I say that, it comes with the implication that we're talking about metabolically healthy also. So the idea that someone who is healthy can and needs to attempt to control their blood sugar levels and insulin levels in a way that is somehow going to influence their health. And that is simply just untrue. Because if someone is metabolically healthy, a healthy individual, it isn't just an unnecessary use of your time and energy to attempt to control your blood sugar and blood insulin levels. You're not really going to be able to do it because they self-regulate. Like, yes, you could like obsessively try to not consume sugar or carbohydrates, and then that is probably going to bring your blood sugar levels lower. The reality is that if someone is metabolically healthy, like you can have like a very large carb meal, even a very large meal with a lot of sugar in it, and it's not going to have that big of an impact on your blood glucose levels because you are metabolically healthy and because your body's going to self-regulate. That's going to release insulin. It's going to pull that blood glucose or that glucose into cells. You're good. Now, I say things like this, like we were talking about before we started. I say things like on this online and people go, oh, so you're saying you can just have like hundreds of pounds of sugar and it's not going to impact your health whatsoever. It's like, why do we need to go to one extreme or the other? It's like, what I'm saying can be true. And then it can also be true that we probably shouldn't be eating ridiculous amounts of refined sugar every single day. So it's just very frustrating, as we were saying before, like when we apply helpful nuance and are actually factual with the information that we're giving out, that is often rejected in the online space because people are so used to seeing extremes. And whether that's like with nutrition or even like the political realm online, it's like you'll notice that the people with the most extreme views also get the most views, because the algorithm is fueled by emotion and fear. And whether people are hate commenting or love commenting, it's like it's going to keep on bumping it up in the algorithm. So you'll see the two extremes of either end are going to get the most traction, they get the most views all the time. And then the people in the middle who are actually applying nuance and are seeing the full picture, they often get shut down.
Yeah. I also want to clarify that the conversation of metabolically healthy or metabolically unhealthy is also not like a judging thing, or it's just objective, right? Mm-hmm. It's, hey, there's people who metabolically are in a good place, and there's also people who are not. Doesn't make them good or bad, it just is. And that's why I think we need to start, because again, it's nuance, man. Like there's always like these ifs and buts, and different contexts, different people, different places of health, or states of health, I guess. So that needs to be said too, because again, like if you're generally healthy, like you can have some sugar, your body's going to regulate it, you're going to be fine. And for some people, yeah, there is going to be a worse response to that, but there's still things they can do. But yeah, dude, that's such a big one. So what was the post you responded to, and what was the thing that started the whole discussion?
It was like, I think someone was doing like an advertisement for like their meal plans or something. And the post said something on the lines of like, it was like a frustrated person eating their salad and saying like, oh, like you trying to enjoy your meal, but like trying to enjoy foods that don't spike your blood glucose. And like the person was miserable, like implying again that we all need to eat in a certain way to not spike your blood glucose. So all I commented was, as long as you're a healthy individual who does not have diabetes and is not pre-diabetic and has no pre-existing blood glucose issues, you don't need to worry about your blood glucose spiking because your body self-regulates it really well. That's like literally verbatim the comment that I left. And you go on that post and there's like 80 replies. I'm happy to say that the majority of the replies are people saying, I came here to say the same thing. So agreeing with me, but then there's a lot of people who are just full out attacking me, saying like, you don't know how diabetes works, you don't know how the body works, all this different stuff, which is just, the irony is not lost with those comments. But something that I got a lot of hate in the comments for saying and for highlighting is that the number one correlating thing to diabetes is not sugar intake, it is obesity. So, there's a difference between causation and correlation, because the majority of people, especially in the Western world, who are obese and have type 2 diabetes, they are over consuming sugars, like the majority of those people. Yes, there can still be genetic factors influencing that, and there's obviously going to be lifestyle factors majority of the time influencing that, but the majority of those people are over consuming sugars. But that does not mean sugar is the cause. Sugar is a piece of that entire big picture, because when we look at how to help people manage or even reverse their type 2 diabetes, the solution comes from weight management and overall lifestyle change. There are the rare circumstances where people are just like, they're not genetically blessed and they are predisposed to having those issues, blood glucose issues, women with PCOS, different stuff like that. But for the majority of people, it is the overall look of your lifestyle and maintaining a healthy weight that leads to metabolic health. And that's where we need to put our energy and attention, rather than demonizing sugar or demonizing this food or that food. And, and this is a point that I really wanted to nail home on this podcast, because I'm given the opportunity. There are a lot of people who think like, okay, because sugar is often getting overconsumed with people who are obese, and then that's leading to them developing type 2 diabetes and all these other health issues. Isn't it a good thing? Like, okay, even if that message isn't necessarily true that sugar is the enemy, isn't it like somewhat a good thing that people are like demonizing it? Because then that's gonna encourage people to not consume more sugar, right? And avoid sugar. That is not supported by research, because you are developing an unhealthy relationship with food, with sugar. You're making it taboo, and you're making it difficult for people to healthily enjoy it in their life, leading to over-restriction. Research shows that over-restriction on certain foods almost always leads to overconsumption on those same foods. So it's just, you have to apply the human factor to it, and you have to apply the nuance of how this impacts people's relationship with food by demonizing these foods. And it's almost never like a positive outcome.
Dude, every single time I get this in some check-ins, right? Especially early on when people haven't fully caught onto it, and that makes sense. But I'll get like suggestions for, what should we get into for the week? And I always ask people like, hey, okay, so what needs work? And like, how do we want to do that? And then early on, sometimes I'll get, cut out sugar or cut out chocolate. And I'm always going to tell them like, hey, like, I actually don't want you to focus on that. Like, I don't want you to focus on, I am not allowed to have sugar. I'm not allowed to have chocolate, right? No, I want you to focus on the things that we're currently working on, which is adding whole foods. It's adding protein. It's right improving your diet as a whole without putting this scary piece of chocolate in the corner where it's always there and it's always staring at you, but I'm not allowed to have it. Like, no, like have it every now and then if you want to. Mm-hmm. Right? That's another one too, because we talk about blood sugar spiking foods. You do not eat single foods for the most part, right? As a meal, right? I was talking about this before we hit record. Like, we can look into, and you must have seen these videos too, man, where someone's literally sitting there with a glucose monitor and they have their bowl of oats and then they show how much their blood sugar has spiked, right? So yeah, that's normal. Like, it's supposed to happen, right? You fucking ate sugar, now it's in your bloodstream. It's gotta go somewhere, of course, but right? But how often, and there are people who may be doing this, but like, how often do we eat a single food? How often do we sit down, we eat a plain bowl of white rice? Usually we don't. Mm-hmm. Sure, like that might massively spike and crash your blood sugars, or at least to some extent, and also depending on the person maybe. But if you combine that with veggies, right? Good amount of fiber, dietary fats, some protein, just that already makes a difference because now it's a slower release into the bloodstream. We can't just demonize a single food. Like, let's look at the big picture, right? Mm-hmm. That's a huge one too. Because it's not the chocolate that's the problem. It's everything else. Like, your diet is not made up of one piece of chocolate. It's a whole bunch of different foods and meals. Mm-hmm. So let's look at the big picture, right? But getting back to your point, like focusing on restriction, as much as I do sometimes like a little bit of a challenge, where clients of mine are like, hey, I think I want to try out, cutting out alcohol for like a month. Cool, let's go for it, right? And then we see how we do. And then if they want to have it in moderation afterwards in a healthy way, then sure. And if not, that's also great because they usually feel amazing, right? Mm-hmm. But restriction, I don't think is the best approach. And like you said, the research shows that oftentimes the things that you try to restrict and avoid, like that's exactly what you end up binging on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. People always forget to add like the human factor into it and how this like our habits, our eating habits are very heavily influenced by our relationship with food, if not sometimes completely controlled. And I like what you said before, not just about focusing on addition versus restriction, but how we don't eat a single food. And it's really funny to see people online talking about like, obviously these are like the crazy low carb salads, but they're talking about like how grapes are bad for you because of the sugar content in grapes. And it's like, sugar is not the only thing in that food. Even if we're just talking about that individual thing, like grapes or like a piece of fruit, it's like sugar's not the only thing in there. It's like we have so many vitamins and minerals. We have the fiber from that. We have the other phytonutrients. It's like we can't water. You can't just gauge the health of a food based on the sugar content. The same people who completely ignore like the saturated fat content in other foods that they're consuming, but that's an entirely different topic. But yeah, we can make changes to our diet, and you can have two people who are on paper made the same changes to their diet, but this person is focusing on restricting certain foods and this person is focusing on adding in certain foods. And more times than not, you're going to see two different long-term results with those people. And the person who's focusing on adding those things in is going to be more successful because they're not having that feeling of being restricted and therefore like they're a victim of the changes that they're making. It's always going to be way more successful when we're focused on adding those things in. Drinking more water, eating more lean protein sources, eating more fruits and veggies to then achieve the balance that we're looking at. I always tell people when we're thinking about what makes a balanced versus unbalanced diet or a healthy versus unhealthy diet, it almost always has more to do with what's missing versus what's there. It's like I eat like a good amount of sugar every single day. I eat some processed foods almost every single day. You know what else I eat? I eat a ton of fruits. I eat a ton of veggies. I have a lean protein source in every single meal that I eat. I drink tons of water every single day. I add all of those things in. So when I have some of those processed foods or some of those high sugar foods, it doesn't really matter because the overall big picture is a very balanced one. Again, the type of context and nuance that a a lot of people don't like hearing, but that is the reality, and that is what makes sustainable long-term change.
Yeah. Dude, I love getting check-ins where people are like, hey, you know what? Like last weekend, I had some fun stuff, right? Whether it's candy or chocolate or just a more processed meal at a restaurant or whatever it may be. Maybe a couple drinks, right? I love when people mention that and they're like, hey, I had some, but I didn't overdo it like I used to in the past. I enjoyed it way more. I feel now way better afterwards. And I don't feel stressed or guilty around it. Like that's the stuff. Like that's where you want to get to, you know? I don't think I can remember a check-in where it was like, I did so good. No, there was a whole bunch of candy on the table and this and that. And like, I didn't touch it at all. Now it will show a lot of self-control, of course, right? But are we always going to have that battle with the thing that we're not supposed to have? Or should we try to have some if we feel like we want to in moderation, which is also a skill we want to train, right? But big picture, man, like you said, it's like not just like you're by definition not unhealthy in quotes because you have some sugar every day, right? It's what's around that. Like you said, there's a whole bunch of whole foods, your water, working out. When that's in check, and again, going back to the healthy or metabolically healthy conversation, like when we are metabolically healthy, we're fine, you know?
Yeah, there's literally no reason for concern. There's no reason to try to, again, attempt to control something that ultimately you don't really have a lot of control over. Yeah, I had a client check in with me just this past week. And this is a long-term client. I've been working there for a long time. So this is a long time coming. And she said, for the very first time in my life, food isn't a stressful thing for me. And I was like, that is like the biggest win I could ever hear in an entire check-in. Because people who haven't struggled with their relationship with food, I don't think they can really understand just how big of a deal that is. Like imagining every single time you go to eat something, it is a stressful or an anxiety-inducing experience. It's like, that is just like a prison in your mind every single day. And to be able to help people drop that taboo. Again, oftentimes people who are overweight are the ones who are struggling with that, and that is leading them to overeat more. So by reducing that taboo, by not demonizing those foods, and by reducing the stress and anxiety around those foods, they're actually able to control their intake more and be able to be more successful with the weight loss and health and fitness goals that are working towards. And something else, because I still to this day have clients signing up with me and they say like, oh, I did really good because blah, blah, blah. And this week, my goals are I want to try to eat less sugar. Like I still to this day, people are signing up with me saying stuff like that. And what kills me is a lot of the times those people are also people who are trying to really improve their performance and are really fit and athletic people. And it's like, they don't realize you are sabotaging your performance by trying to intentionally not eat carbohydrates and intentionally not eat sugar. And then again, this is another area where nuance and context really matters, because someone who is very, very fit, very active, high level athlete, maybe like a triathlete or something, can you imagine if they tried to not eat any sugar? Not only would that just completely just tank their performance, it probably would be a very, very, very unhealthy decision, because it's going to be so much more challenging to consume sufficient enough calories to support their activity levels. So again, another example of how this context and nuance matters, where for the majority of people, the average person, especially in the Western world, in North America at least, consuming less sugar and consuming less carbohydrates is probably going to lead to a positive health outcome. But if someone is in very good shape and is very active, there's some people by intentionally consuming less sugar and less carbohydrates, that could actually lead to a negative health outcome, especially for women, like running into hormonal issues and stuff. Again, people don't like to hear it, but the context and the nuance matters, and individual circumstances matter on what is going to be healthy for one person versus healthy for another.
Yeah. It's also the hard part about social media, because something that may be true for a certain individual may not be true for someone else. Yet anyone, maybe not anyone, but like anyone can go and think, okay, so sugar is bad. Okay, so I guess I got to cut it out without context, right? And like you said, we also get a lot of CrossFitters and people who are runners and want to do a marathon, and then it's like super low carb, right? Because that's what they've always been told to avoid. And they also want to lose weight, and their energy sucks, and they have cravings and hunger all the time. And right, they get injured. I keep telling people this, like, hey, look, right now, like actually what you need is more carbs, right? And sometimes that's quite difficult too in the beginning, especially if we're talking. So I want to stay on this topic real quick. So people who are already training a lot, CrossFitters, runners, etc., maybe people who do bodybuilding and stuff. These people, right, where right now the goal isn't weight loss, it's performance or muscle gain, whatever, or even just eating at maintenance, right? I've seen a lot of people struggle with just getting enough in to hit their maintenance, which is also something you'll get used to. I feel like in the beginning, I don't love the term force feeding, but we have to push through it a little bit so that our natural hunger satiety cues kind of return to where they should be. But oftentimes when people got to push those calories, I'll even tell them like, hey, because we always recommend 80-20, right? So 20% could be anything else, and then 80% is whole minimally processed foods. I'm always like, look, the 20%, like you can have that and be totally cool. And I go through their food log and it's like 90% whole foods. And I'm like, hey, look, I love this. But knowing that you need more to fuel your training and recovery, plus you have a hard time actually getting enough in, plus we already have so many carbs to play with, let's have some fun stuff. It's going to make life easier for you. Mm-hmm. And not just that, it may actually be beneficial around training. And I'm talking like before, during, or after training, right? Because people always demonize fast absorbing carbs and quick carbs. But look, like simple sugars, they're great around training. So again, context. In that specific scenario, have some candy, have some chocolate milk, have something quick. If we look at what runners do during marathons, they have these gels, right? Or like just a general sports drink. What's a sports drink? It's sugar, right? It's quick sugar that ends up in your bloodstream so that we can then perform and recover better. Now, of course, maybe not everyone should be drinking that by the liter if they're not being active, but that's, again, a different story.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're not talking about the average situation or the circumstances that's going to be applicable for most people. But yeah, I've worked with some extremely high level CrossFit athletes, like literal games level athletes, and some women who are like 65 kilos and they're pushing 3,400 calories a day because they train so hard every single day. And for someone like that, it's like, do you really think a 65 kilo woman is going to be able to eat more than 3,000 calories per day if we're not eating like a significant amount of pretty calorie dense sugar and carbohydrate sources? Like, it's not possible. And again, that would make trying to only eat whole foods would be an unhealthy decision for that person. Not only, again, taking their performance, but it would be unhealthy because they would be in such a calorie deficit while pushing themselves so hard because it's not physically possible to fit that much food in them. Does that mean that we need to be scooping white sugar, by the spoon? No, you can have like dried fruits. You can put honey on stuff. You can choose like a little bit more like natural whole food ways of getting those calories in, but you got to get those calories in. Yeah. All good context and nuance.
Absolutely. So let's actually bring it back to the common, comments that you got, the responses where it was like, well, if you're diabetic or pre-diabetic, it's different, which by the way, again, you literally said that in your initial reply. Mm-hmm. You literally said, if you are metabolically active and you don't have, diabetes or you're not pre-diabetic, then it's okay. And then people attack you by saying, yeah, but I'm diabetic, or yeah, but I'm pre-diabetic, or someone else being like, hey, but what about people who are pre-diabetic or diabetic? We're almost attacking something that's wasn't even part of what you stated.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But could you explain why this may be a bigger problem for people with diabetes or who are pre-diabetic?
If you have blood glucose issues, if you are diabetic, pre-diabetic, have any sort of blood glucose issues, your body does not have the same ability as someone who is metabolically healthy to regulate your blood glucose. And then if you are frequently consuming sugar or consuming too high a load of sugars, like we talk about high glycemic foods, what the real issue is high glycemic loads, the actual load of sugar that you're consuming. You can run into situations where you have chronically elevated blood glucose levels, and that is extremely bad for you. So again, it's understandable why some people think having a blood glucose spike is bad for you, because chronically elevated blood glucose is such a horrible thing for your body. But the analogy that I like to use is it's like saying a chronically elevated heart rate is very, very bad for your body. That doesn't mean every single time your heart rate goes up, it's an unhealthy event. It is when it's chronic over a long period of time, it's like really weighing down on your body and stressing out your body. So for an individual like that who is diabetic, pre-diabetic, or has those blood glucose issues, again, swinging it back to what we started the conversation, if they are overweight or if they're not maintaining a healthy body weight, that is the number one thing to focus on in order to improve their metabolic health. So working towards a calorie deficit, using an appropriate approach, increasing their activity levels, taking an overall lifestyle approach to things, if they're consuming alcohol, if they're smoking, stuff like that, touching on that kind of stuff. But taking an overall lifestyle approach and trying to get their weight down to a healthy level, that is going to have the biggest impact on improving their blood glucose levels and A1C, stuff like that. Beyond that, if someone, because that's not applicable to some people out there. Like I said, there's some people that are just not genetically blessed, and that also might have some lifestyle factors in there. What we can do is pay more attention to, again, the glycemic load of the meals that we're consuming. So making sure that the volume of carbs and the volume of sugar isn't too high and too frequent in the foods that we're consuming, making sure we're eating plenty of fiber, plenty of protein, and adjusting the balance of our meals and the composition of our meals, again, with fiber, protein, fats, so that it lessens the glucose response to those meals that we have. But again, swinging it back, if someone is overweight, that is the number one thing that you got to focus on to help improve overall metabolic health.
Yeah. And a lot of times people do become overweight by over-consuming. Not even a lot of times, every single time, right? When people get overweight, it's because of overconsumption of calories. Sure, like sugar may be a big part of that, but it's not the actual sugar, it's the overload of calories, right? With keto being so big these days too, like there's gonna be people who don't agree with this, but again, I don't care because it's objective data, it's research, right? If you are in a calorie surplus, even if you're on keto and you don't eat any sugars, you overconsume calories, right? You will gain body fat. And
you will gain body fat, and you might even make yourself more metabolically unhealthy with those very blood glucose issues that you're trying to address.
And that's another one, man. Like people just, I don't know where it comes from. Is it really misunderstanding? Is it people actually having bad intentions? But like, I don't know, man. It's so, we cannot ignore the calorie conversation, the energy balance conversation. And sure, there's hormones and all those things that play a role in that conversation. But dude, too many calories, you become overweight. If you let that go too far, yeah, we may become metabolically unhealthy. And again, sugar may be a big part of that for a lot of people. Like a Western diet, right? Like we may actually see that being a big part of their calories. A lot of just sugary drinks, processed foods. But going back to what we were saying, like there's actually things that you can do to reverse that. So, because that's a big one too. I also don't want people to think like, well, I'm pre-diabetic or I'm diabetic or whatever it is. Like I'm doomed. Like, no, we're not. There's actually something we can do still. Like, I'm not saying it's easy, right? But you and me both, we work with people who are very overweight sometimes, right? Who have elevated, chronically elevated blood sugar levels, and we get them to a healthy range. It's possible, right? How do we do that? Not by avoiding blood sugar spiking foods. Like, no, we focus on the good stuff. Mm-hmm. A lot of whole foods, fruits, vegetables, exercise, creating a calorie deficit. I like also that you mentioned doing it in a proper way, so to speak, right? In a way that's responsible, and we're not doing any crash diets. Dude, there's people can get such an amazing transformation without having to focus on all this fear-mongering stuff, right?
Fear sells, and it's an uphill battle always when you're trying to apply that nuance and not take those extreme approaches. We didn't even touch on, you're just talking about some of the overweight clients that we're working with and the approaches that we take to help improve their blood glucose levels. Because I have worked with clients and they're like, my A1C, it's not looking good, like it's getting worse. Then we do like make it a goal to improve their metabolic health and blood glucose. And the only time where I'm like really saying like, let's completely avoid this thing is when we're talking about just like sodas. And what I tell them is replace that full calorie soda with a diet soda, like replace it with a Coke Zero. And then you have people online who are telling you that the Coke Zero is even worse for you than the full sugar one. And it's like, I just don't know how much more energy I have to combat this stuff about like somehow the idea that a Coke Zero or like artificial sweeteners is going to be more damaging for someone who is struggling with diabetes than a full calorie Coke. It's just, it's hard to argue something that's so incredibly stupid or that is going to contribute to someone's diabetes or anything like that. I feel like that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, I mean, there's also research on that actually shows, hey, diet sodas may help you lose weight. I actually like it. When I'm cutting, I try not to overdo it, but I actually have more diet sodas around that time because it's It's the carbonation that also kind of keeps you full. You still get something sweet. It's something nice to have, right? We're already on lower calories, right? We need to be more specific and, more in control of our calories. It's just nice to have, And I mean, that's a whole other one, the artificial sweetener one. But like the long story is, it's in a way, it's the same stuff, right? The long story short is it's the same stuff because we're making a massive problem by addressing a tiny little thing here that in the big picture doesn't really do that much.
I forget who did the post recently. I thought they explained the demonizing artificial sweeteners thing just so perfectly. And I wanted to do a similar post like that, and I didn't know how to word it, and he just nailed it. In that the dose, like the idea that aspartame is unhealthy for you, the dose of aspartame that you would need to consume in order to reach like an unhealthy level, like I think is like literally like in the hundreds, if not thousands of like cans of Coke Zero per day or like Diet Coke per day. So when you think about it that way, it's like you will die of water intoxication from consuming that much before you will even come anywhere close to the level of aspartame that's unhealthy for you. And this all started with the rodent study in like the 70s. I think it was like 1970s, where they gave rodents like unheard of doses of aspartame. Like, look, they got cancer. It's like, no shit. It's like if you did that same comparison with water, like I said, they would have died. Those rodents would have died like with 1/100th the dose that you gave them, because they would die of water intoxication. So it just doesn't make any sense. But I think ultimately human brains really like to oversimplify the problems that we run into. And that's why we so often see these extreme views being the most popular views in the nutrition space, because it's really nice to just think that, sugar is bad for you. This is good for you, just like black and white statements like that, when the reality is, again, we need to apply that nuance, and we need to apply individual circumstances to what is and is not healthy for someone.
Yeah. And again, like I said before, like that's the hard part about social media, and even for us to create content, because to really give enough nuance and context, it's hard to put that in one post. And that's something we actually think about when writing stuff and creating stuff. Many people don't.
That's okay, what people with morals think about. There's a lot of people who go out there who just think like, what is gonna blow up Instagram? What is the extreme view that I can say today? It's like I heard someone saying the other day on Instagram, like there was some post about someone saying like carrots aren't real food, like something like somehow implying that carrots are bad for you. It's just like that obviously is put out there with malice. Like, she knows that is not a true statement, but it's going to blow her up, and it's going to help her get more sales of whatever she's putting out there.
It's those people. It is. We recently saw, I mean, there's been many hypes over the years, but like recently, like big ones were like the supermarket posts where they hold a product and it's like, this is whatever. And then of course the shirtless wooden plate fucking, eggs and blueberries and steak. Like, people are also just jumping on trends and trying to get views, and absolutely. There was one I saw yesterday, which was actually like a what's it called again, like a stitch, where they respond to a clip. But it was someone, and they had a bag of like some kind of cereal, and they put water in it so it became like a mush, and then they grabbed a magnet and they went over the cereal, and then the iron started to collect, right? And then she was like, there's literal iron in your food. Yeah, this product is fortified with iron.
Yeah,
iron is magnetic.
I saw the same thing with baby formula, where they did the same thing with the magnet over baby formula. And they're like, they're putting metal in your baby's food. It's like, it is fortified with iron. Like, iron is iron. It's like, this is new information to people.
We need iron, Yeah. Of course, there's even there context, right? You can have too much, too little. Like, neither is good, right? Mm-hmm. But there's foods fortified with iron, and like, for a reason also, because a lot of people's levels are actually a little bit lower. If they try to avoid red meat, which is a whole other conversation, because that's also still being demonized, as much as that's like super nutritious for you, right? I'm saying like whole food, steak, those kind of things, right? You also need iron. And if there's a little bit of iron added to a food, probably not trying to kill you,
Yeah.
It's not
It's
that,
funny
like
how-
they're not putting actual rat poison in your food and trying to get away with it. You
Yeah,
know?
just putting like shaving off chunks of metal and just throwing that in your food. It's funny how like we've been bouncing off of like all these different like myths and misunderstandings in the nutrition world, and it's just like coming to me right now. It's like there's a hair of truth in every single one of these things, and that's what makes it so confusing. Like you just said about like, oh, people also demonize red meat. It's like that all really started with studies on red meat consumption and mortality rates, and how people who consume more red meat tend to die earlier. But that is correlation and not causation, because people who are consuming more red meats also just happen to also be living more unhealthy lifestyles, like in the North American world. And then there was the studies on like vegans and vegetarians and how they live way longer than like the average person who consumes animal products, or at least meat. And again, causation versus correlation. Someone who is vegan or someone who's vegetarian is so much more likely to overall live a healthier lifestyle and take better care of themselves. So then you see that correlation there to longer lifespans. So, and then with the sugar stuff, with the context of what the average person is struggling with in like North America with their diet, there's a little bit of truth in every single one of these myths, but then it's blown up to an extreme, again, because people understand that a little bit better and it's easier to sell. So you got to cut through the BS, I guess.
With the vegan one too, I think like I'm just gonna dive into that one for a little bit too, because in the past, I kind of agree with that statement, because if we look at a traditional standard American diet and just, like a vegan diet, let's say 10 years ago, 5 years ago, massive difference. It's not 2025 and you can get everything vegan and you can live a standard American diet vegan. And I don't think that if you replace that with just the vegan version of it, that it's going to do anything for you.
Yeah.
I think if it's more like traditional vegan, like whole food based, and absolutely, many people can benefit from that, right?
And as long as you're staying on top of making sure you're getting those nutrients that you need to get that could be missing that you would normally consume with animal products, because there are people who there's these influencers. I think it was a couple of years ago. Tragically, this woman died from malnutrition. She was a vegan influencer. I think she was like a raw vegan influencer.
Yeah, like a fruit. I think she was a Russian girl.
Yeah,
somewhere
she died
in Asia.
of malnutrition, like literally died of starvation while eating this diet because she was so undernourished. But yeah, that's a funny thing that you bring up, because what veganism was like 15 years ago is totally different than now. Because 15 years ago, that meant someone was eating an entirely whole food diet. And then now it's like you can have the most processed diet in the world and eat 100% totally vegan, because there's all these new vegan products out there. This vegan bar, this vegan cereal, this vegan this vegan that. It's like, it's not really the same as it was before.
So even just there, context. Okay, vegan, what does that mean, right? Are we doing whole foods? Are we doing a whole bunch of crap?
Yeah.
Oreos and Pringles are also vegan, and we can have that for every single meal, and it's vegan. But like going back to what we were actually talking about, like there's a lot of little things that have a hair of truth to it that are just blown up, and that people who don't fully understand nutrition and stuff and who don't look into research and will fall for, because it sounds convincing. There's a lot of people who are very convincing in content, even though they kind of don't know what they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
With or without bad intentions, right? So it makes sense. Literally, I was there, I was confused. I was trying to look for information. I would just Google how to lose weight, right? And the first couple of things I did, train wreck, because like it's the same unsustainable approaches that you still see these days. So yeah, dude, it's funny how, again, we work with real people. You and me both. Many people. How long have you been coaching?
7 years now? 8 years?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. 7, 8 years. I'm almost at 5. We both helped hundreds of people literally like overcome these things. We also know how, and we also know what tends to work and what doesn't, right? And it's funny how people like us with good intentions who actually want to help and like provide context and proper information and like guidance. It's funny how like this stuff often gets the backfire on those type of posts, right? Because it's not an extreme statement. Of course, I do get it. It sells less because it's not cool to say, hey, just sleep a little bit more, eat some more fruits and veggies, eat some protein. That's very boring, right?
But it's funny how we are fighting against, we are a part of an industry that is completely against us. The diet industry right now is like a $300 billion industry. And the vast majority of everything in that industry are gimmicks and are not intended for you to actually succeed long term. The diet industry, if anyone's listening to this like and wanting to lose weight, the diet industry wants you to fail. Because the more that you fail, the more desperate you get and the more willing you get to come, money in hand, to throw it at the next thing that pops up, the next fat loss pill, the next fad diet, the next workout plan that's guaranteeing you this dream bod. The diet industry wants its clients and its customers to fail. So that when people like us come in, who are actually here to help and give people lasting results, we have this $300 billion industry that's been screaming messages at them their entire life to tell them that their solution is a quick fix. Their solution is this next gimmick. So when we come up and say, actually, it's probably going to be a better idea if we address your entire lifestyle and work on these new behavior change tools and learn how to adapt and overcome life's challenges and build better stress management skills and work on your sleep and build a little bit more balance in your diet. That is a really hard sell, even though we actually get people results. But yeah, we're literally a part of an industry that wants all of the clients to fail.
Yeah, dude, especially like things like, the meal replacement shakes and those kind of things, like they're still around, man. Like there's a lot of people here too. It's like, it's from a business standpoint, like it's great because if you not become dependent on my program or supplement or whatever it is, you keep coming back, And I will say this too. So I currently work with our people an average of, I think it's like 13 and a half months currently, which is a long time. That's of course ranging from 6 months up to like a few years. But long story short, we work with the people for a long time. But it's not our goal even to keep them forever. It's not, because realistically speaking, no one will have a coach forever. So I think it's also a responsibility to say, cool, I'm going to help you get results, but I'm also going to teach you how things work. And I'm also going to show you how to do these things, knowing that at some point it's going to be up to you. And then when it's up to you, you're going to have to rely on your habits and your lifestyle and your decisions and your mindset, right? So like that's what we should work towards. And whether that is a 6-month coaching journey, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, right? Like at some point you're going to be on your own. So like that should, in my opinion, right, be the actual ultimate end goal to get people to. It's not an easy task. It's also a big goal and it's difficult, right? And we may not fully get there, but even if we can be part of that, let's say we work with someone for 6 months and they still have more work to do. Cool. Like at least we're moving them in the right direction and empowering them instead of becoming dependent on a program, whatever that is, whether it's a workout program or whether it's a supplement or a meal plan or whatever, like ultimately it's going to come down to you and your behavior and lifestyle.
Building our clients' independence so they no longer need us to begin with. That's the little motto I tell all my clients. It doesn't seem like it's a good business model, but teach them so well that they don't need me, but treat them so well that they don't want to leave me.
I love that. I really like that. That's the way I look at it too. You got to take care of our people. We want to make sure that, hey, like you should be able to do this by yourself after this, But of course it's great. Like I do love when people stick around for a long time because I feel like the longer you go, the more you get to address and work through, right? Because especially early on, it's going to be all about eating habits and training and mindset, whatever it is. Like at some point, like that becomes almost like it becomes a habit, right? Like we do it because that's now part of our lifestyle. But then when you keep going, there's going to be new goals, new objectives, new challenges, and new lessons to learn. And that's what I think is really cool because then you run into something new and then we can work on that because everything else is already taken care of, right? So I love that. I think it's a very cool thing to do. Actually, very grateful that I get to do this. I know you feel the same. It's like, it's a cool shit. Like seeing people like change their life for the better and just become happier. Like it's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I've talked about this a lot just in my personal life when people talk to me about what I do. It's very cool helping some clients, like just some athletes, like drastically improve their performance. It's very cool to help people make these like crazy physical transformations. But when I have the opportunity to work with someone for years and they start with like no stress management skills. They start with like a very fixed mindset. And over time, you actually change the way that this person like thinks, and you're able to change the way this person perceives the world and handles challenges, and is now so much more confident. Like, there's literally nothing more satisfying than that. Or like what I talked about earlier in the podcast with helping someone change their relationship with food, where it's no longer a stressful thing. It's like, that's just gold.
Yeah, dude. That being said, if people want to learn more about your coaching, what you do, where can people find you?
Follow me on Instagram at coach.greg.sut, or at Evolve to Excel on Instagram also, and www.evolvetoexcel.com. Check us out. Always dropping evidence-based content that you guys need to hear.
Awesome, dude. Dude, thanks for coming on again. I really wanted to dive deeper into that sugar conversation, because I also saw your post and I was like, we got to talk about this because it comes up all the time. But I'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Do you have anything else that you want to share, like any news or updates?
Honestly, things are pretty chill over here. Nothing new. We're doing what we're doing. We're working on a mini series to offer you guys. So that's in the works. A mini series of, it's going to be Stop Starting Over. So help people finally stick to the changes that they're making, going over some new skills. So that's in the works. But besides that, same old, same old.
Awesome. Dude, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks you very
again.
much.
Have a great week.
Ciao.